What is up, party people? How are you guys faring today? Are you guys well? You guys enjoying your morning? Enjoying this lovely day? I know I am. Every day is a lovely day. I've made so much progress recently. Shh, it's coming. I'm almost free of the pleb worlds, but that's another topic for another video. Today, I would like to talk about some of my latest theories and harikari or something similar to that, if you get what I mean. So, I'd like to talk about my youth too, growing up. So I grew up in isolation pretty much exclusively. I was homeschooled because of, father's work, etc. So a lot of my youth I spent pretty much as alone as most people can be. Like, I had to be homeschooled because we had to move around so much, touring and all of that when I was growing up. So that was a pretty unique experience, especially because there's not many homeschool support groups that exist when you're, gallivanting halfway across the country every so often, which was the case. So, it was a unique experience, though. I definitely wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. Definitely not having some sort of, more stable or, like, less risky life. But at the same time, it did disconnect me socially from most other people, and I'm not sure if I've ever recovered from that socially. I wonder if that had something to do with, like, my weird voice, where I didn't talk a lot when I was growing up, and as such, my vocal cords just never really got that strength level. I'm sure if I wanted to, there's, like, some sort of training I could undergo to fix my voice and all of that, but I doubt it's worth it. Like, who cares at this point? I'm too old, so it doesn't really matter. You know, there's so many things wrong with me as far as, like, that kind of perspective, that it's just pointless to try and fix it at 35. I'm an old man at this point. I'm just gonna live my life and enjoy what time I have. But anyways, so I was pretty much homeschooled. I grew up in total isolation outside of the family unit, and a lot of that means that, like, my social development growing up was quite, I can't use the word I want to use, but it starts with an R compared to other children. And I could definitely feel that up until my teens and growing up. Until university. I went to university 2 years early, too, because I was homeschooled, so, and it was related to tech. I have a degree in computer information systems with a minor in physics. So, it was related to tech, and I was, programming it in QBasic as a 9-year-old, so most of my classes were a joke. So I kind of got a free 4.0 just from that. And when I went to university, it was back before, like, this wokeism stuff was there, but it wasn't prevalent and taken over completely. So you could still sort of wedge through. I was born at the luckiest time, by the way. Like, I got to experience the real America, and I got to just barely dodge all this woke stuff, and I got to enjoy the golden age of video games. So, for me growing up, that was a lot of luck and a lot of escapism there that allowed me to get through all of this. And so, you have to take the good with the bad as far as your upbringing, right? And as far as your start in life. And yeah, I'm short and ugly, so that didn't help either, but, at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like, from a standpoint of not interacting with people, most of my interactions in life have taken place online, at least the interesting ones. Like, I can get through the office life or whatever have you, or any sort of boring social situation like that. It's no problem. I wouldn't call it an anxiety or anything like that. I've never really had it that bad, but it does make things, it did make things when I was growing up slightly worse, just because I never got, like, a lot of the social things that everyone's talking about. Like, even today, people are like, the Super Bowl, or, have you seen the latest Netflix adaptation? And, today it's understandable that you don't care about any of that, that you're not associated with any of this. But that wasn't always the case as far as social isolationism goes. Like, back when America actually had good entertainment and it was a good nation, there was this reason to actually enjoy a lot of this media. Like, I can still remember all my friends talking about, like, even in the 2010s, there were still some gems, like The Walking Dead or whatever people were going on about back then, and I never I eventually did watch that, at least like the first few seasons, uh, just to be able to talk about it with coworkers and such. But the vast majority of the time, I was completely uninterested and didn't really understand a lot of the other like sweeping social phenomena, especially because like every region in the country has its own like distinct culture. I don't know if how many of you have traveled a lot through America, but like especially even as a teenager growing up, I could clearly and very succinctly put like the differences between like a teenager in Kansas versus a teenager in New York versus a teenager in Arizona, etc. And all of these places I've hopped about. And you know even the entertainment as far as this country, just because of how vast and how divided it was even back then, it was all so separate. But when you combine it all and bring it all together to what we have today, it wasn't nearly as polarized, and there wasn't this clear dichotomy, right? Like people from X federation could still enjoy things from the opposite, right? I'm sure there were still some metropolitans that enjoyed, some sort of country bumpkin stuff, and I'm sure some of the country bumpkin people enjoyed like, oh, the latest X in the city or whatever, they went on about. Like, who cares, right? You can tell the issue with my socializing already, as far as like, who cares about this modernity stuff, but it is what it are. And then you have to compare that though with growing up and isolation. Kind of, if you're like someone that goes through that or someone that's experienced that, isolation kind of warps the world in a sense when you're that isolated. As I was a teenager, like I didn't really understand the social decay that was taking place, and it started, let's see, how old was I? I was like 14 when 9/11 happened, so I didn't really understand the implications of like 9/11 or, the Patriot Act and a lot of the things that ripped this country apart and destroyed this country, or like the fortified election of 2020, we'll call it, the fortified election of the year 2000, we'll call it, the one Jeb Bush fortified. So the relevance and understanding all of these greater issues was just completely lost on me because I was so disconnected from society, right? I could tell from like a cursory glance the like vapid first layer of how these people interacted, but I couldn't like delve deeper than that and get anywhere interesting. And a lot of that was because I was so disconnected from society, and I didn't really comprehend or understand what that was until just recently, right? So, as I think over a lot of the points in my life, like especially some of the darker points and where they originated from, I think it would probably be that sort of disconnect from people. And I would suggest, if you're in a position where you're that disconnected as well, to not go forward. So, for instance, me now in my like neatdom again, my retirement age, now my golden years, I want to get away from this society because it's bad, and because I was away from this society when it was good, when I was a teenager, it negatively impacted me. And so modern day society is actually, I think, the exact opposite of the situation that it was when I was growing up, where you want to escape it rather than, be embraced by it. And you're just some oddball when you're growing up, so, who's going to deal with that, right? And in the modernity, or, the modern age, like society specifically is hostile to like Caucasian males, right? And so, especially Jewish Caucasian males, unless you're in the, nepotism group, which I am. I could be in the nepotism group if I wanted to. I have all the options in the world. A lot of that is lost upon you, and, the healthiest thing you can do as far as mentally in current year is probably, like, getting away and just retreating back into, your own sort of pseudo safe spaces, right? Because that's the real end game in modernity, especially during a collapse, is just finding, a place where you can click on your little gems and just enjoy seeing the XP go up, or total levels, building yourself and enjoying like progress, just even with even if you all you can do is calisthenics, that's fine, right? Like I have a weight set, but you know, a lot of good it does me, but it's probably due to the way I work out, because I did break my arm last year, and you know, physically moving enough is rather difficult for it. So it's still recovering. I'm not sure if I'll ever fully recover. I didn't go to the doctors, by the way, because fuck doctors. Oh, I said it. But, you know, it was snapped like a twig. And so, you know, it's grown back like in a weird angle and stuff, this arm. But, you know, it is what it is. It just slows me down working out. And I know since we're on the depressed topic of isolation and, you know, how it relates to modernity and the previous lost world, another thought is like harikari, in case you don't know, self player killing is you know, before I used to think it would be like a libertarian stance where if it's what someone wants to do with their life, that's something that's acceptable. But in recent years, and coming to understand that all life, I think, is innately valuable, like even the life of, you know, a cow or an unborn child, all of that is precious. So, you know, even if you are in a place of suffering, you still owe it to the universe, in a sense, to not take any life, including your own. So, you know, if you want to live towards at least principles I consider to be universal, then, you know, you're not allowed to remove yourself if you're in a dark place or you're socially isolated. The solution is to, you know, find communities or create communities that you enjoy being a part of. And it really only takes like 3 or 4 good friends for you to live a fulfilled life. In fact, I would suggest not having more than 3 or 4 good friends, and then building on your hobbies and working towards things that you can actually enjoy. And that would be the ideal, like, sort of mental state to get in, and it's not very difficult to get there. I'm pretty sure everyone can. And one of the big things is making sure you're surrounded by good people. And also, Corrupted Gauntlet gives a ridiculous amount of gems, and I probably shouldn't talk any more about this topic, considering the platform, but that was just my Skitzo rant for the day. Hope you enjoyed.